I was reading Lord of the Rings the other day, and I got to the chapter called The Black Gate is Closed. It's the chapter where Gollum stops them from entering Mordor via the Black Gate because...
They touch you! They touch you!
And all of a sudden, as I'm reading it, I was struck with a weird thought that I've never had before. How did Gandalf plan to get into Mordor?
One does not simply walk into Mordor.
It's a really weird and basic question, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I started to look into some other ways into Mordor. Now, I just want to be clear about this. I am reading this book for the first time in my life, so I am sure that I will make some errors in this, and I'm sure that some other people will know some other passes or ways into Mordor, and if you do, please let me know in the comments. You can also check out the channel more if you want my takes on my first time read as I read through the books for the first time in my entire life. So go check out the channel. You can make sure you subscribe and like the video for that. But in my research for this, and I didn't do a ton of research, but I just, scanned because I don't want spoilers, I think I found 5 possibilities of how Gandalf might enter into Mordor with Frodo. And all of them are as unlikely as flying the eagles over Mount Doom and dropping the ring into the fire. But it's speculation. And what's more fun than a good scenario for Lord of the Rings where you're just speculating on things? So the first thing that's important to know within this whole discussion is that Gandalf never actually planned to take the entire fellowship through to Mordor. They all actually met by happenstance, namely Providence in Rivendell, and then decided to journey together as the fellowship, or as the book describes them, the company. And in Rivendell, as the company is being chosen, this dialogue happens in the book that's really important to know for what the Fellowship was ultimately supposed to do. It says this: "For men you shall have Aragorn, son of Arathorn, for the ring of Isildur concerns him closely." "Strider," said Frodo. "Yes," he said with a smile. "I ask leave once again to be your companion, Frodo." "I would have begged you to come," said Frodo, "only I thought you were going to Minas Tirith with Boromir." "I am," said Aragorn. "And the sword that was broken shall be reforged ere I set out to war. But your road and our road lie together for many hundreds of miles. Therefore Boromir will also be in the company." And then there's another section when they're in Lothlorien, and Celeborn says, "Boromir and any that go with him seeking Minas Tirith will do well to leave the great river above Rhoros and cross the Entwash before it finds the marshes." And it's also important to know that when they're leaving Rivendell, Elrond makes sure that they know that they are not bound by any oaths or any kind of contract. And this is really important to know for what Gandalf is actually really planning. So as far as they can all go as far as they can go, but they can also leave at any time. And this leads to actually a legendary discussion with Gimli where the book says, "The further you go, the less easy it will be to withdraw. Yet no oath or bond is laid on you to go further than you will. For you do not yet know the strength of your hearts, and you cannot foresee what each may meet upon the road. Faithless is he that says farewell when the road darkens," said Gimli. "Maybe," said Elrond, "but let him not vow to walk in the dark who has not seen the nightfall." "Yet sworn sword may strengthen quaking heart," said Gimli. "Or break it," said Elrond. "Look not too far ahead, but go now with good hearts. Farewell, and may the blessings of elves and men and all free folk go with you." So when we're at this point in the books, it's actually understood that the Fellowship will break before the end. And I think that's important to know because I think this is in Gandalf's mind. I think he knew this all along. And I actually think there's another really interesting thing to consider with that as well, in that I believe Gandalf actually wanted certain things to happen, like Gollum following them. Now, I cannot prove this definitively because perhaps Gandalf actually wanted to wait till they were out of Moria to confront Gollum, and perhaps maybe capture him out of Moria, and maybe just the Balrog threw the whole plan out the window or something like that. But why would Gandalf not confront this creature as soon as he knew Gollum was following them? Why not just leave Aragorn around a corner so that when Gollum rounded it, they could capture him and take him as a prisoner? Now, I say that, but I'm sure the noise that Gollum would make when he was captured would probably rouse every single orc in all of Moria. So perhaps that was the actual reason, and Gandalf knew that all along, that he would be really loud and obnoxious. But I think something more important here to consider is that Gandalf seems to be letting this happen because he sometimes believes, not sometimes, he seems to always believe in this idea of providence in this book. Just like the discussion that he had with Frodo about being in possession of the ring, where Gandalf says, behind that, there was something else at work, beyond any design of the ringmaker. I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker. In which case, you were also meant to have it. And that may be an encouraging thought. He believes Frodo, by some kind of divine providence, has the ring. And so I also actually think he believes in some kind of providential way that they will find a way into Mordor. But with all of that, let's actually track the possible ways that they could get into Mordor and talk about Gandalf's plan all along. But I think one thing that's really important for all this too is that Gandalf wanted secrecy. So the first and most obvious thing that they could do would be actually to take the Black Gate. Actually, I don't think this is necessarily that obvious, as Gollum, like if Gollum knew that they shouldn't take the way in, then I think Gandalf would clearly know this as well. But I think the thought process behind this, that is perhaps maybe Aragorn, as soon as he gets back to Minas Tirith, reclaims his throne, and he will muster up the army of Gondor and perhaps march on the gates of Mordor with maybe Rohan as well. Maybe he draws up all the free folk and all the men of Middle-earth, and they go and fight directly at the Black Gate. And maybe they draw Sauron's armies there, and perhaps Gandalf and Frodo and Sam could just sneak by into Mordor. Now, I doubt that. I really don't think that's his plan, but the descriptions in the book say that there were kind of a lot of holes and caves by the entrance through the gates of, or through the Morannon. So perhaps one of the plans going off in his head is to go through the Black Gate. Very doubtful. But option 2 is to go through the pass of Cirith Ungol, where Shelob lives. I think this one might be actually the most rational one, seeing that the company was looking to depart near Minas Tirith, and perhaps Gandalf's plan was to go through Osgiliath, and he wanted to go through it undetected and do the same exact thing that Smeagol kind of wanted them to do in the beginning, which is go through that entire thing. Maybe they're hoping to avoid Shelob there, and perhaps this is also why he wanted to keep Smeagol alive. Maybe he didn't know really the way to this path. He was, before the books really start the journey, in captivity in Mirkwood with the elves, and that could have actually been for the reason that Gandalf wanted to interrogate him further and find other ways into Mordor, as Smeagol would likely be one of the only people in Middle-earth who might know other ways into Mordor. But that's, again, doubtful, because really the reason he was in Mirkwood was because he was being rehabilitated, which is a wild thought. But I think this one is probably the more likely of the two options that are the most obvious choices. The reason I think this is because it just seems like it's the more secret way into Mordor, one that not a lot of people knew about. Yes, an evil spider lives in this pass, but maybe Gandalf thought that he could take it and destroy it. Perhaps he thought that he was going, that was going to be his test rather than the Balrog. He didn't really know the Balrog when he was walking into Moria, and maybe he thought Shelob was going to be his ultimate test. It's all speculation, but I think this might be, again, the most rational plan of Gandalf's that he maybe had in his mind. Now here is where we venture into the unknown, because in the book and in the movie, we just know of these two things, the two passes, which is through the Black Gate and the Gate of Cirith Ungol. I think I'm saying that right. But J.R.R. did briefly talk about a third pass that I want to mention. This third pass is called the Nargle Pass and is at the southernmost end. On the website Tolkien Gateway, there is actually an article about it that says, the Nargle Pass is not mentioned in the narrative of the final published version of The Lord of the Rings, and is not mentioned in the maps that were published with Lord of the Rings, and with unfinished tales of Numenor and Middle-earth. The name Nargle Pass is mentioned in the earliest drafts of the chapter The Muster of Rohan, and the name Nargle Pass is mentioned in a later draft of that chapter. In those drafts, it is said that orcs of the forces of Sauron, respectively, used the pass to move from Mordor to the south. The Nargle Pass is spelled Narghil Pass on the first map of the Lord of the Rings, and Nargle Pass on 1943 map of Lord of the Rings. The Nargle Pass is located in the southern part of Ephel-Duath, eastward of the headwaters of the River Harnan, and east of the Barad-dûr on the first map of Lord of the Rings. Although the second map of the Lord of the Rings and the third map of the Lord of the Rings do not include a label Nargle Pass. The contour lines of Ephel-Duath on those maps indicate a gap in approximately the same locations as the first map of the Lord of the Rings. That could potentially be a pass. Okay, that was a long little bit of information there, but this could potentially be a possibility. Now, I actually have a personal theory that this pass maybe no longer exists, because if it did, wouldn't the forces from the east and the south that are just coming to take this path, wouldn't they just go through this pass into Mordor? Especially if Sauron wants to hide his forces in any number in any significant way. Maybe he really just wants to boast about his number, so he's like marching them right past Osgiliath. And maybe he just wants to know, or wants everyone in Middle-earth to know how many forces he actually has, and he just wants to walk them through the front door. But I kind of doubt it. I feel like these people would take this pass into Mordor, so maybe it's shut, so they have to go all the way around through the Black Gate. But again, I think this pass might have become an impossibility for some strange reason. I don't really know why. I don't have any theories on that. But I also don't think this was Gandalf's plan either, because look at the distance they'd have to cover here. This journey alone would add another month to their journey, just from the pass alone. And then they'd have another few-week journey from the pass to Mount Doom in Mordor, where orcs are roaming everywhere. I think this isn't really likely. Now, here's the fourth option. Another option is that they go around the north via the Sea of Rune. Now, this could possibly work, but it would also add weeks onto their journey. And I think this does offer a few good things mixed with a few bad things. The good is that it seems undetected. They seem like they could kind of move on the mountains in quiet and in isolation for a good portion of the journey. And then this little mountain range here kind of offers them some protection from the actual forces of Mordor, or maybe where the forces of Mordor are actually dwelling. But I think the bad is that I just don't really know what is out here. As a first-time reader and someone who doesn't really know much of the geography of Middle-earth, I don't know what's going on in this little area right here. I think this just seems like too long of a journey for Gandalf. And while it's far, surely Sauron has forces patrolling the eastern watches of his realm. So I don't really know if this would really be an option. This could be an option realistically, but I also don't think this is something that Gandalf had really planned for. Now, option number 5 is the best one. It is the most likely option, and I'm actually shocked, and everyone is going to smack their heads when they hear this, because it is a totally original theory that I just came up with. And I think it's actually kind of bizarre that no one thought of this before. Why don't they just fly the eagles into Mordor? I'm kidding. I think the 5th option is actually a combination of everything that I was saying before. I think Gandalf actually didn't have a plan. I think his plan was that he was going to be guided by Providence, that he knew that the Fellowship and Frodo in particular was guided by Providence. That line he says to Frodo about him being meant to have the ring is as much of a comfort to Frodo as it is to Gandalf. I think Gandalf, by saying this, knows that this ring has to be destroyed, and that this hobbit that Gandalf loves just happens to have it. It is just too much providence for anything else to be doubted. I think Gandalf was marching to Mordor simply knowing that in some way they could find their way through and into Mordor and destroy the ring. Perhaps the light would shine on some unknown pass of the mountains, or maybe they just kind of break out some of the climbing gear and start mountain climbing over these huge mountain passes. Perhaps, too, Gandalf knew of maybe another pass in his research about the ring when he was in Minas Tirith, and maybe that's really why they were going to see Denethor, because he's lore master. Maybe he knows other passes that exist here. I don't really think anybody actually knows. I think there's lots of speculation on it. I think it's like a fun little topic to discuss, But I think, again, all of this is speculative and we just don't know. And it's a boring answer, but I think truly at the end of the day, the way that Gandalf was going to get into Mordor was just simply to make it up as they went. And somehow, some way, the path into Mordor would unveil itself and the ring would be destroyed. But the Eagles are always a good backup plan. Anyway, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.